Airplane pilots of Reddit. What was your biggest "we're all fucked up" moment that you survived and your passengers didn't notice? This was about 7 years ago now. I took my brother and 2 cousins up for a short sightseeing flight one morning in a Cessna 172. I knew there was some weather coming in, so I wanted to get it over with quickly. About 20 minutes in, I noticed the clouds getting worse and then some lightning off in the distance. Definitely time to head back. Heading back, I radioed my intentions. Uncontrolled airport but with an FBO. And someone radioed back with the current winds. It didn't compute what they said. And in retrospect I should have asked for clarification. Get back to the airport, and as I'm on final I realize just how bad the wind is. Having a hard time keeping on centerline and eventually go around on the first try. By now I'm starting to sweating bullets and planning on rerouting if the next attempt doesn't go well. I make sure to turn the intercom off so my cousins in the back can't hear how panicked I'm becoming. Though I did keep my cool through the whole thing. On second attempt I've got the rudder pegged to the left and managed to get the wheels on the ground safely. I taxi to park, shut down, jump out, and start shaking with adrenaline and let out a huge sigh of relief. Cousins had no idea what just happened. It was just an exciting flight to them. My brother kind of knew what was going on. And I let him in on what I was thinking later. Apparently I had an audience of guys from the FBO watching me as well. Probably yelling at me to go somewhere else. I'm honestly surprised sometimes I managed that landing with no incidents. Especially since that was basically my first crosswind landing. Uncoordinated turn and all the fuel went to one side of the plane. Choked both engines. Sputtered and cut out 3,000 feet high. So brought back the coordination and pointed down a bit. The started back up. Yikes. Edit. Well, this got some attention. Some clarifying points. Number 1, not an airline pilot. I'm an aerial photo pilot. Had one passenger, the camera operator, and he didn't notice, but to be fair he was pretty into his podcast. Number 2, it was intentional to be uncoordinated. We use skidding turns to turn 180 degrees faster so we can get one line and collect more pictures. Number 3, it was a light twin. We were lowish on fuel and that's what enabled the airplane to be starved of fuel. Under normal circumstances this would not have happened. Okay, clear skies. Adios. Commercial pilot here. Not the most exciting story, but because there aren't any good ones yet I'll reply. I was flying myself and 3 passengers over the Appalachian Mountain on a clear day. We hit some mild turbulence and the door opened to the cabin. The passengers all started panicking, so I basically said, "Chill out guys, this happens all the time," and tried closing the door. I couldn't get it shut while also flying the plane, so I simply landed at a nearby airfield and closed it on the ground. After the trip was over I told the passengers that was the first time that had ever happened to me and I was slightly panicked as well. Edit. I can answer any other questions while I'm here since many of you have DM'd some. Once. Departing Burning Man in a private plane with a couple of passengers. My engine conked out. I didn't even follow the engine out checklist. I glanced at the fuel pressure gauge, didn't like what I saw, hit the switch for the auxiliary fuel pump. And it came back to life. The whole incident was over so fast the passengers never even noticed. I wouldn't call it a "we're all fucked" moment, though. Worst case scenario, I would have had to set it back down on the playa, which is pretty flat terrain as far as the eye can see. I was in the process of getting my private pilot license, and I was flying circuits solo. Before I took off, the CFO of the flight school asked me if I was sure it was a good idea to fly. It's pretty windy. I was flying a Cessna 152 on a day with wind pushing 15 kts and turbulence around 20. I honestly don't know what I or anyone at the flight school was thinking letting me, 16 years old, take off. Anyways, a few bumpy circuits go by with no problem. I actually got some great practice landing in turbulence. So the last circuit of the day, I'm on final with full flaps doing the absolute minimum speed for approach in a 152. Not taking into consideration that the air is super turbulent. For those who don't know, When it's bumpy you should be going a little faster on approach than usual. Anyways, I'm quite close to the ground, maybe 300 to 400 feet, and I can hear the wind blowing over the sound of the engine. Suddenly, no wind. I had just lost 15-20 kts of almost direct headwind on final approach with absolutely no airspeed to spare. I remember my shirt sleeves looked like they were inflating and the plane's stall warning started screaming at me. The controls became totally useless, like a limp computer joystick. Thankfully I had my hand on the throttle like my instructor taught me, and for whatever instinctual reason, good instructor probably, I gently pushed the throttle all the way and slightly lowered the nose. All of this took place in the span of about 5 seconds. I remember what I did, but not thinking about doing it. It was like when you drive somewhere and you suddenly realize you've arrived without remembering driving. Damn scary. Anyways, I landed the plane just fine and went home and took a nap. My parents said I was pale as a ghost when I got home. Flying is fun until it isn't. Edit 1, thanks for gold. My first. Edit 2. A lot of people are wondering why I gently pushed the throttle in. The reason is because the carburetor can't provide enough fuel to maintain the proper fuel/air mixture. When the pilot rapidly pushes the throttle in, the carb is supposed to provide a quick squirt of fuel to account for the rapid increase in air. If the pilot slams the throttle to the firewall, the huge amount of air coming into the carb is simply too much for it to maintain the proper air/fuel mixture, even with the extra squirt. In the best case, this can cause the engine to lag for a few seconds while the mixture catches up, and in the worst case might actually cause the engine to stall completely. So imagine an inexperienced pilot who panics and really jams the throttle all the way. That may have a disastrous effect, because not only are they at low altitude with little airspeed, but they just choked their engine and simply can't get more power. This entire story occurred in less than 10 seconds and should have ended with headlines on CNN. Military pilot and not commercial, but it still could have ended in a disaster. Flying a CH-47D Chinook helicopter in Iraq mid-July 2008 when the temp was over 130 degrees, packed full with 36 passengers at an altitude of only 100 feet and speed of 140 knots. Lower and faster than you'd ever fly in the US. We hit a thermal pocket of warm air that pushed us up. So I nosed the cyclic, looks like a joystick between your legs, forward to maintain altitude. I was a brand new pilot flying with a combat vet who wanted me to maintain altitude of 100 feet almost exactly. So no higher than 120 or lower than 80 feet, nosing the aircraft down kept us from going higher. But we immediately hit a downdraft and the aircraft started to fall like a rock. I pulled back on the cyclic as hard as I could to get the nose up, but it hit my body armor and wouldn't go back any further. I watched the altimeter drop all the way to 19 feet and miraculously we started falling and began to climb at the last possible second. During the debrief, the other pilot, now one of my closest friends, who had well over 1,000 combat hours, told me he's never been so close to dying before. I wasn't shook up until I heard that. Even typing this today gives me chills. Edit, hopefully made it easier to understand. Edit. Holy shit, I'm lucky to get 10 to 20 fake internet points for my posts. I can't believe this blew up the way it did. Thanks for my first ever guiding. That's a really badass surprise, and I promise to get back to everyone who messaged and commented. Thank you again. Reddit is a great place sometimes. Not completely on topic, but I was an aircraft mechanic for the Navy back in the day on A4 Skyhawks. Student pilot notices his canopy light is on, indicating his canopy isn't all the way closed and locked. He decided it might help if he cracked the canopy open just a little bit and close it again. I remember seeing it land as a convertible. We sent a couple of guys out in a pickup truck where they found the missing canopy in a farmer's field. Deleted. Mine is from many years ago when I was a student pilot. I was 14 I think at the time. I had about 15-ish hours done and getting close to soloing for the first time, but still had a few hours and more landings to practice. I was doing some basics and getting ready to come back with my instructor to practice some touch and goes for a bit. Coming back through, we had to pass through DTW's Bravo airspace, means need permission to go through it. A few minutes before I was about to call for permission, my instructor got really quiet. I looked over at him and he looked really bad. I thought he was going to puke, so looking for a bag, but then I notice he isn't breathing. I figure out where I am at and call up DTW approach, declare a medical emergency and that my instructor was not breathing. I also told them I am a student and never landed on my own before. And never in a large airport. Detroit Approach was amazing at helping me. They gave me an option for DTW or Willow, but Willow would have added a good 5 to 10 minutes since I was coming in from the SE. Opted for DTW and they were great at giving me vectors while also getting the big jets out of the way. I remember hearing them tell several planes to go around and several more into a hold. Anyway, did my approach and made the most butter smooth landing I have ever made in my life, even till this day. Ambulance was right there on the taxi waiting for me. Turns out my instructor, who was only 25, had a heart attack. He ended up being okay. All in all, from first call to him in the ambulance was less than 10 minutes thanks to ATC in DTW Tower. Edit, thank you so much kind strangers for the gold and silver. It's my first for both.